Hi, this is Maryland Comptroller Peter Francho. I may not listen to every podcast out there, but I do listen to the Maryland Crabs.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Fernay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Fernay.
I pushed record, and the lines are moving, so that means it's working.
So when you're talking, the little lines are going up and down?
Yeah. Well, they're going side to side on this one. If I turn my head sideways, they're going up and down.
So we are recording this time.
We are recording this time.
This time, John.
Yes, that's right.
Because we are the Maryland Crabs.
Is that the one we're doing today?
Yes.
Yeah, we're not doing hardcore history?
That'd be awesome.
No, it wouldn't. That's 4 hours of nothing but sheer boredom.
Oh, it's like 4 or 5 hours, and there's like 7 of them. So you'll get 35 hours on World War I. You get 40 hours on Genghis Khan. It's the best.
All right. Now let's put this into perspective here, okay? It takes you 4 days to edit an hour-long podcast.
Like 3 or 4 hours, I think. Because I'm meticulous.
You don't have enough life left in you to edit one episode of a Mark. Is it Mark Maron? Who does that?
No, Mark Maron does WTF. That's Dan Carlin.
Dan Carlin's Hardcore History.
You better be thankful that I do all the editing that I do, and I take off all your gasps and stutters and all those things and the dog's jingles. I'm going to leave that one in just to prove a point.
Fine.
Your dog's over here gasping and jingling. And normally I'd take that out. But you know what? Now you're going to get the gasps and the jingles.
That's fine. Okay. Hey, Market House episode. That was fun.
That was fun. And I was a little worried about editing that because we were in the middle of a huge din. And I've got to tell you, it's a lot of fun now because when you go there, there's always a crowd of some sort. And even when we were there that night, it wasn't like it was packed, but it was a really healthy crowd. You could move. But I had to grab a table and like push people away.
It was busy. But
busy. I was worried that we wouldn't be able to hear.
Busy and everything else. Again, like we said last week, if you haven't been to the Market House, go down, check it out. If you're down for Midnight Madness, which is happening tonight, also next Thursday and the following Thursday.
Right. I'm there every time.
Go down there, have a beer at the Market House, get some pizza or the pasta or whatever else.
We had lobster rolls. Well, you didn't.
They were good.
Yeah, they were delicious.
That's what I heard.
John doesn't like seafood.
And Kara's great.
She has a lot of fun. She had a cloak.
She had what?
She had a cloak or a cape. She's very fashionable.
Yeah, that's right. A little fashionista.
Right. And Alex just came strolling in.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, he did. He just strolled in, sat down in front of the mic like an old pro, just turned it on, settled in.
Waiting for his jacket.
That's all he wants. That's a good time. We got to do more of that. I mean, I was worried because we had a lot of people talking at one point. So editing that was kind of pulling my hair out.
Right.
A lot of echoes. But it was fun. We got to do more of that.
We should. Hey, this week's episode, man, I am so Jones for it. I like it. This, I think, is one of the best ones we've done. And this is with TJ Smith.
And he does most of the talking, which is an oddity for us.
Well, it's an oddity for you.
No, I'm the strong silent type.
That's not what the sound wave says when you edit it.
Because I don't talk to many people, so I get excited.
Tim. Everybody else. Tim.
He's wiggling his hands around.
Did I ever mention I lived in Bethesda?
You did.
I grew up in Montgomery County.
No, you didn't. Liarhead.
But TJ Smith is used to be the public information officer for the Anne Arundel County Police Department, and when former Anne Arundel County Chief Kevin Davis was brought up into Baltimore and was the deputy commissioner and ultimately the commissioner of police, who we talked to. You ought to go back and listen to that. But TJ was the voice of the Baltimore Police Department, and no holds barred in this conversation. I mean, he talked about the death of his brother when his brother was shot.
Yep.
Talked about what Baltimore needs to do.
He's a great storyteller too.
He really is. About how he got his start here in Pioneer City, out in Severn in Anne Arundel County, working with kids, teaching them how to tie neckties.
Right.
Just a really great guy. I'm really excited to see where he's going to go next.
I think it was funny. We met him. What was the restaurant we met at?
Zinburger,
which actually, it was a good burger.
Very good burgers up at Arundel Mills Mall.
We were professionals. We didn't even break recording while we were eating. So we were like eating with our faces away from the mic so you don't hear us chewing, although you probably do.
That's true. Although I did edit out the part where the waiter comes in and says, "Oh, can I help you guys with anything?" Yeah, right. Yeah. I said, "I'll take a Diablo Burger."
Yeah, I was up at Arundel Mills, which I have not been there since they opened. I've only been there once. And so now I'm good for another 20 years. But it was funny. We sat down. You got iced tea, even though I was driving. I had a beer. I had a Miller Lite. And he got like the Chablis or he asked for a wine list. I felt so low rent. He got like a Pinot Noir.
But no, TJ's a great guy. I mean, he's really candid. I think everybody's listening to this is really going to enjoy it. He's got some great insight into Baltimore. What the hell's wrong with it? He's worked for, I think he said 4 commissioners. I mean, because they went through them like real quickly after they got rid of Davis. But I mean, it was like Davis and D'Souza and Tuggle and I guess 3 commissioners and 2 mayors.
Right.
1,000 murders, over 2,000 shootings.
He told us some great stuff off mic too. He waited till we were like the equipment was packed up before he started telling us some stuff.
That's right. And a little bit in there, he talks about a very high profile Anne Arundel County person that he had a little bit of interaction with when he was a cop.
Yeah.
We know who you are.
Yeah. We know. We know some stuff.
All right, let's get into it. TJ Smith.
Here's to the teacher who spends her weekend helping children who need a little extra attention. To the soldier who missed the birth of his baby while serving overseas. To the EMT working full-time and taking night classes. To the police officers and firefighters working long hours away from their families to keep our families safe. Here's to you, our hometown heroes. I'm Alan Hyatt, Chairman and President of Severn Bank, and we know there are many heroes among us. Men and women who serve without expecting anything in return. Which is why we're honored to offer our Hometown Heroes program to educators, law enforcement officers, firefighters, first responders, healthcare workers, and military personnel. Whether you're opening a checking account or buying a new home, we're here to give back to you. Learn more about our Hometown Heroes program at severnbank.com. Severn Bank, here with you.
Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
From Main Street to Maryland Avenue, West Street to Ego Alley, and the circles in between. Shop local this holiday season by shopping at Midnight Madness in historic downtown Annapolis, with all stores open until midnight this Thursday. Post a selfie from Snowflake Alley, sip cocoa on City Dock, visit the baby alpacas, and on every street corner, enjoy dancers, carolers, and music. It's Midnight Madness. Visit DowntownAnnapolisPartnership.org. Midnight Madness is sponsored by the Downtown Annapolis Partnership, Sheehy Lexus of Annapolis, and WRNR.
Hey, we're up at Zinburger at the Arundel Mills Mall. We took a road trip, and we are with a familiar face, certainly to me, and probably to millions of people that watch the television, not the millions that listen to the podcast because we're just a little bit short. But TJ Smith, who is the face, most recent face of the Baltimore City Police Department, is joining us. And how are you?
I'm fantastic. It's great to see you. Great to talk to you again. We had a great relationship when I was here in Anne Arundel County, so it's great to talk to you and talk to the people around Anne Arundel.
Well, it's so cool because you, for people that aren't aware, I mean, you got your start in law enforcement in Anne Arundel County, right?
Yes.
As a patrolman,
as a police officer,
writing tickets.
Yeah, as a police officer, many years ago. And it's funny, I didn't know Anne Arundel well back then. I remember when I was first hit field training, and I said, how am I going to ever learn these streets, know where anything is? Then it became something like right back of my hand.
Second nature,
yeah,
sure.
And I remember I did a ride-along with an officer, a millennial. So this is many years later, of course. I did a ride-along, and I remember being in a police car with him, and we were getting a call for service. He wasn't writing it down. I'm like, what in the heck? And he just looked at his computer screen, popped it in his GPS thing on his phone, and that's how we navigated to the call. And I just remember my ADC book that got me through the roads here in Anne Arundel.
And that was your introduction to the GPS, huh? The miracle of GPS.
Yes, the GPS and policing. It was like, okay, all right, this is new because I hadn't been in a police car in a while. So, I had the computer, of course, but being able to navigate. I came up in the era of still writing down the call that you were going to and using the map book. So
sure.
Yeah.
How long were you with Anne Arundel County?
How
long were you with Anne Arundel County?
Before I went up to Baltimore, about 16 years.
Okay.
About 16 years or so.
And then there was kind of a trade-off deal in Baltimore.
Well, I think people look at it and think that it's something strange or whatever. But in reality, what we have to have is leadership that thinks outside the box. And in Baltimore, their communications person quit. They were in the midst of a crisis. It was a riot in the city. And they wanted somebody who had already a level of trust with the community, familiarity with the area, with the community. And they asked for me to come. And,
Well, it certainly didn't hurt that you were
with Chief Davis or Commissioner Davis at that point. I mean, he trusted you.
It was absolutely a trust thing. And again, from a community standpoint, I already had some sort of reputation of trust. And
you had a good reputation.
It worked out. Yeah, it worked out with everyone because Anne Arundel started up a heroin task force, which we know is near and dear to everyone's heart, where we have to look at cross-border initiatives because the heroin and the fentanyl isn't discriminating as opposed to what city, what county, wherever. So we looked at it as a task force, and I happen to be part of a communications task force where you have officers that are part of a drug task force, and that's a normal occurrence. We have officers in Anne Arundel County and Baltimore City, Baltimore County, that are on different task forces that spend more of their time outside of their areas of where they naturally work than not. So that's just part of law enforcement. We have to share resources.
And this is something I think people who don't live on the East Coast understand. It's how jurisdictions just are on top of each other. You know, if you're in the D.C., Baltimore, Virginia,
I don't think there's an area in this country that has more concentrated large municipalities than the Baltimore-Washington region. If you think about it, in a 45-minute ride from anywhere in Anne Arundel County, you're into police departments that serve populations of 500,000 people up and down the 295 or 95 corridor.
Certainly.
And you can count maybe 10 to 12 of them on your hands, which are major police departments. If you look at the rest of the country, many of them aren't situated like that. They're spread out more. You look at a place like Texas. You might be in Dallas, you might be in San Antonio, you might be in Houston, but here it's all within a 45-minute ride, which makes recruiting much more difficult over here, of course.
It also makes jurisdictions much more difficult. I worked somewhere for a while where they had these task force when it came to gangs, and we would get people would show up. It would be Anne Arundel Police accompanied by someone from Tyson's Corner, from somewhere in North Fairfax County. And out of Virginia, and they'd have to work together. In D.C., too. I have a friend of mine who works, he's a D.C. police officer, but he works for a federal task force for guns. Yeah. But, I mean, I think when I lived out west, you didn't have much of that because there was just these wide-open counties.
And you didn't have as many people that were crossing over from state lines.
Exactly.
We're so small, people cross over state lines. And one of the first, I guess, besides drugs, I remember when we started seeing more human trafficking task force, which was necessary as we saw the increase of human trafficking.
Especially on the 95 corridor.
Right, exactly. So this stuff is important. So us having the ability to work with federal task force is important. And we just did something that was more local. And, you know, the people who like to gossip, of course, wanted to make an issue out of it. But I think people who just cared about the work didn't really care about the situation.
Right, yeah. No, it was just share. Sure, but even swap and everything else. I mean, I think it was a great loss, and I think I wrote something that was a great loss to see you go up there. But obviously, I think in the situation where you were being called into was where you needed to be.
Yes.
And now you came into this after the riot, just after the riots?
Just after the riots. Not long after the riots. Riots were in April, May. And I arrived there in 2015. Right. Yes, I arrived there in August. Of course, you had to get paperwork, and the commissioner there at the time, Batts, was fired in July of 2015.
Right after the riot.
And Davis took over, and a few weeks later I went up.
Right, and Davis at that point was the deputy commissioner, right?
Yeah.
And okay, so then he took that over and then brought you on and said, hey, there's no, and I remember, I mean, Kevin was very plain, said, you know, there's no other person that can come and do this job right now.
And I mean, I'm humbled and honored at that opportunity to go up there. That was tough work, and it was a tough decision to make the decision to accept the opportunity once it was presented and all worked out. But you know, although I got paid, that was volunteer work in a lot of ways because it was rough. Of course, become part of the culture. And it's a lot of work to be
part of the culture for the Baltimore Police Department,
right? Of course. I mean, just you become part of the family there, and you know it was very, very tough. You know, with everything going on, I got there right before the trial started for the officers, so everything was on edge. We were on edge about everything. Was there going to be another riot? What was the outcome of these trials going to be? Then, of course, you have the escalating violence that's taking place on top of this. Later, corruption and scandal and scandals.
Right.
So it was a lot.
Detective Souter was in there. And
I mean, when I say I learned a lot, it was like being in a senior command position right next to the Baltimore Police Commissioner, right next to the Baltimore Mayor, 2 of them. I learned a ton, and I got to see how decisions are made. I got to see some good and bad. So I learned a ton. It's nothing that a school can teach you. This was hands-on experience, learning a lot.
Plus, Baltimore was under the microscope for a long time because it was a political issue nationally. Because the conservative media and a lot of people were pointing at Chicago and Baltimore as 2 examples of corrupt city governments or incompetence when it came to handling violence. But then, so there's a lot of flailing on a local level, too, by what you and the mayor saying they're shuffling people around because there was demands for some sort of results.
Right.
And it's hard to do that in a short period of time, especially after the riots.
Yeah, and going to Baltimore from Anne Arundel, it's people have to understand it's 2,500 officers in Baltimore, and you see the news of the few officers, which it really is, and I know people hate hearing that, but it is the relatively few that find themselves in this level of corruption that they did. But you see people who have a heart in service, but you also see people who have been neglected for many years, and also made me appreciate Anne Arundel County that much more because of the continuity. For the first 12 years or so of my career, I had 2 police chiefs, and if you just compare that to just this past year, and I left in October, I had 3 bosses in Baltimore in 10 months, which to think 12 years, 2 bosses, and what happened in Anne Arundel. There was some scandal. There was some things that took place that led to instability, and that instability starts at the top. So, and it affects the ground level officers, which is unfair.
Well, it's like throwing a rock into a pond. I mean, you got the ripples that
exactly, and that ripple effect. So, going into that environment, I had a different level of appreciation, but I worked beside some people in Baltimore who really had an amazing heart for the city and heart for the work that they did.
Well, I'll say you were the face of the Baltimore Police Department and you really enveloped yourself into the community. And before we started recording, you were talking about back in Anne Arundel County working in Meade Village. And again, this is something, I mean, you've got an affinity for kids. You have your own son, who we're Facebook friends. He's a cute little SOB. He's keeps you on your toes and everything else.
Yes.
But, that's your affinity is for the... I'll say the kids, the young, the
young people, yeah.
I mean, and that's where it is. I mean, we're all going to be dead soon enough, and if we can leave the young ones there. Now, what did you do at Meade, though?
Yeah, so when I first came to, I didn't know much about Anne Arundel County, and this is one of those things where people say they want people from the community to be police officers.
Well, back up for a second. Where were you from originally?
Baltimore.
Baltimore.
From the city of Baltimore, living in Baltimore County at the time, and I came to the police academy, but born and raised in Baltimore, went to Baltimore City Public Schools. So I ended up here by happenstance. I actually worked at the Target on 198, which at the time, when I first was offered the position, it was a promotion to go to that. I thought it was in Prince George's County.
Okay.
And it was Laurel. I thought Prince George's County.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's right across the line in Anne Arundel County. Okay. So I started meeting police officers, and that's how I applied. An officer actually who I would see all the time said, you should apply. That's how I applied and became an officer. But I heard about this community called Pioneer City. And I heard it had some issues, and I voluntarily asked to be assigned there. And I was assigned there. My partner at the time, and I'll never forget this, had a lieutenant. And rookies are normally the first ones that they send to midnight shift if there's an issue, a vacancy, or what have you.
Makes sense.
Myself and the guy who came out of my academy class with me were partners, basically. We worked side posts together. And we were working the area, walking foot patrol, trying to know people. And the lieutenant made a decision at that point not to send him and I to midnight shift because he felt like we were working and working out. And I think that's a defining moment in my career because it kind of kept me motivated because he recognized I was actually trying. And I ultimately became the police and community officer over in the Meade Village, Pioneer City, Still Meadows area. And we developed a program for young people over there called Ties. And we called it Ties because initially it was about teaching these young men how to tie neckties. But then we decided we wanted to tie everything together that we were trying to teach them, which was about opportunity. Because we would tell them, if they were drug dealers or gangbangers, whatever, go get a job. But we take for granted they literally knew how to get a job. They actually didn't. So we decided to peel back the layers of the onion and say, here's what a job application looks like. Here's how you fill it out. Here's how you communicate. You should be ready when you take this application back to get an interview on the spot potentially, and communication things, and develop a level of trust with people. So that was just something we felt we wanted to do. And I just had an investment I felt in the community, and I felt like I could make an impact to mainly young black children who did not see a lot of positivity from police, and just simply in their own community. And I wanted to represent that.
Well, you did a good job. I remember you threw a Facebook post up one time where it was one of those. By the time you're done with it, you're crying. But it was a kid that you had worked with that tracked you down, and I don't know whether we were in Baltimore or whatever. And it was saying,
I remember,
TJ or
he
Sergeant Smith, Lieutenant Smith.
Yeah.
You made the difference.
It certainly made me emotional. This young man. I would be back and forth at his house constantly for behavioral problems, see him in the community, and tell him, a thing or two about what he needed to do. And I was pretty hard on him. I wasn't a real big excuse type of guy. And he tracked me down years later. I was still in Anne Arundel at the time, but I'm in my office years later. I got this call, and he says, "You probably don't remember me." And I remembered him. And he just simply called. I'd never forget, it was right before Christmas. And he said, "I'm just calling to say thank you." And he wasn't living in Maryland any longer. He had been transferred with his job and promoted and all, and was doing well. And he just called to say thank you. And that's the thing. I shared that not to pat myself on the back, but more to let people understand that they have to know their power and influence in people. And it's an intangible. You never know who you're going to affect. And I didn't know I had that type of effect on that guy's life. But I told him that was my Christmas gift. Him calling me and telling me that. It was an emotional moment because I never expected to hear that. You don't do it to hear a thank you.
I mean, it is special. I mean, and as you said, you don't necessarily know. I mean, you could pull somebody over for, DUI, and that may be their rock bottom.
Yeah.
And because you've arrested them and didn't cut them the brake and say, okay, just get home that last block safely or whatever.
It could change someone's life. There's another guy, and I'm not going to say his name. He can tell the story if he wants, but he's rather influential these days, and he's the Anne Arundel County guy. And again, I mean, I pulled over and locked up more people than I can count. And one day, and I do remember his scenario, he was like driving on a suspended license, similar example, something that he did. And I was like, look, dude, you can't do this. Was decent to him, didn't tow his car, and took him home. That was just, that was normal, just to be decent with people. So I'm normal, didn't think anything more of it. And years later, he had risen to a platform of influence, and he asked me to speak at an event of his, and he was so grateful and thankful for what I did to him, and he called it a turning point in his life because he was down and out. So that kind of speaks to the whole zero tolerance policing. If we don't have discretion in our policing, we never know what somebody's going through and what effect you can have on them by simply your presence. And we have to realize we're humans. I mean, everyone goes through tough times, and just because you have a badge and a gun, if that's what we think gives you power, then you're in the wrong profession.
Oh, absolutely.
We were talking about that not too long ago, the effect that people have on your life, and they never know that effect they have, and how many people you've probably touched in your life, positive way, but they never thought about it. I was thinking, I can name probably 5 or 6 people who have given me advice, or they said something, either to the good or the bad that had an effect on me, and they probably don't even remember who I am. But it's changed me in a way. I remember one guy years ago when I was a kid, and he said, "Can you do me a favor?" I said, "Yeah, what?" And he goes, "I'm impressed with the fact that you said yes first." And ever since then, whenever anyone asked me a favor, I always said yes. Before, and he probably doesn't even remember who I am.
Right. Well, I tell you, with the whole thing with Baltimore, me leaving, that was a heck of a moment. It was almost like being able to be at your own eulogy, because it's crazy to think that, because I was shocked at the response from people. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and try to be super modest as if I didn't know people, like me and took to me well. But I look at myself as just a guy who does a job. And when I was leaving, I prepared to leave because I think it's just appropriate to say goodbye. And when I left, to hear the response and to see people every single day stop me, and it means a lot to me when they told me that I made receiving bad news easier, and they trusted me, and they put their trust in me. And that means a lot, and I don't take that lightly. That's a responsibility, and I feel like I have to live up to that responsibility with everything I do. I can't embarrass, obviously myself, my family, but the agency that I'm working for, because people do hold me accountable and hold me responsible. So,
well, by all accounts, you were very popular, not only among the police department and the people and the media, but also with the community too. And that's a trifecta that's really kind of rare.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I don't take that lightly. That's a responsibility, and there are many people that are in leadership roles that have to understand the power of their influence. There are certain things that I can't say. There's certain opinions that I won't duel out simply because I have a level of influence, and I have to recognize that. And people are, and I've said and done things. I think we all probably have through this last couple of years of a certain level of national discourse we've been through, that you kind of like, okay, you got to take a step back. And really, I care about people. And, when I was here in Anne Arundel County, cold case homicides or unsolved homicides or events, that mattered to me. And one of the cases that stands out in my mind, and I'll call this a defining moment in my career as a spokesperson. And I kind of knew that it worked for me. I mean, because it's not an act. What you see is what you get. That's just who I am. But when we had a triple fatal accident on 3 right at 32, getting off 32 at Route 3, a family was killed there on a summer evening. And I remember the news reporters out there asking me how long the road was going to be closed. And 2 children were killed, like 8, 12-year-olds and their mother. And the question was how long that road was going to be closed. And I didn't answer the way I think people typically expect the police to respond, which is the road's going to be closed for several hours while investigators mark up the street. I didn't say that. I said we're going to do the family a fair investigation, and I know that this is an inconvenience for people, but it's nothing compared to the inconvenience it's going to be when we go knock on the door of the victim family of these people who are deceased. So a 15-minute inconvenience was going to be well worth it for those people who are not going to get a knock on the door.
And that's the whole thing that everybody likes about you. And I mean, the people in the news media I've spoken with Jamie Costello is the realness about you. I mean, you're real. I mean, you don't pull any punches. You're fair. If you can't tell you something, you don't say, hey, here's why I can't tell you.
Right.
Which is something that everybody appreciates, certainly in Anne Arundel County, and one of the reasons why Kevin Davis pulled you up into Baltimore City. Again, you probably went through the most difficult time in your life with your brother, who was killed in that whole violence in Baltimore. Yeah. And I just can't imagine, as the spokesperson, getting the phone call saying, hey, this...
Well, it wasn't a phone call, and that's the eeriness of that whole situation. Toughest situation of my professional career, obviously, and the way all that went down, it wasn't a phone call. I was alerted to every violent act that occurred in the city, which during my tenure was over 1,100 murders and 2,000 plus shootings, and then everything in between that was violent or perceived to be violent. That's a lot. And then all of the intelligence that flows as a part of that. So this is constant ringing of your phone, buzzing of your phone. On that particular night, July 2nd, I was doing the Baltimore thing. I was steaming crabs at home. It was the holiday weekend. And I hadn't taken off any time the entire time I was in Baltimore. I worked. I was there on a mission. Wasn't there for vacation. I was there for a mission. So I hadn't taken off any time, any real time, and I was actually taking off a few days at that time. And July 2nd, again, summer day, I actually come down to Anne Arundel. A buddy of mine goes crabbing. I went and got some crabs, a half a bushel of crabs, and was home steaming them. And my mom told me I told her I always steam crabs for her. Told her I had some crabs for her. Did she want to come pick them up? She said she didn't feel like coming out that night. I said, well, this is my mother and my mama's boy, so I was taking the crabs to her. So I took the crabs to her. As I'm pulling back in at home, I see an alert come across my phone, and I recognize the name. And I immediately send a message to the commander. I said, I think that's my brother. And he said he would send me a picture if I wanted him to. I said he could. He sent me the picture. And like anyone who has ever been in that scenario before, I was in denial, even with a picture. And then it was a race. I had to race to my father's house to tell him before social media did. And then my sister, my younger sister, who is, my brother and her were just a year apart. My brother and I are 15 years apart, but her and him were a year apart. And they were thick as thieves, and had to tell them what happened. And, it was heartbreaking. And then, of course, all secondary, of course, to the fact that you lost your loved one is the fact that you're a public figure. And you're in Baltimore. And this city's been on the news for the violence. And what more of a sexy story is it nationally than the spokesperson who talks about this stuff is now a victim, a family victim. So that was Sunday. By Wednesday, I came in and had a press conference because everybody was talking about it. And fortunately, the media was decent enough not to put the information out there. So I wrote up a Facebook post and put it all out there on my own.
Is social media, you've been spokesperson from when social media was next to nothing. And I remember you were the first one in Anne Arundel County to get out there on Facebook and on Twitter. If you wanted to find out what shit was going down, you get a hold of TJ on Twitter. Yeah. How do we arrange this discussion tonight? Okay, Twitter, it was all on Twitter. Mm-hmm. I remember when I was at the Army-Navy game in Baltimore, I was tweeting TJ, hey, can you hook me up here? So you've really developed a social media. Do you find that is a hindrance in police work? As far as that, would that have been a real concern that are you finding that people find out bad news before? Wow.
Yes. There are social media blogs that put out the names of people before we're able to notify families sometimes. And of course, there could be reasons why certain information is withheld publicly that gets out through social media. And it's a blessing and a curse. I was actually at a school recently for American Education Week, and one of the schools that I went to, it was a teacher who reached out to me on social media, asked me, could I come? Yeah, I can. I'm available. I'll be there. So it's a blessing, but at the same time, you have people who might abuse it and put way too many thoughts and too much information into social media. And it takes on a life of its own, rumors and all. We saw in Baltimore, and it was a news story with the whole police commissioner selection where somebody tweeted something, and that ultimately became this person's going to be the police chief and led to a big apology or no, this is not the police commissioner. So we as individuals have to use it to vet our own information. But I'm the type of person, look, it's really easy to tell the truth. It's difficult when people lie. It's difficult when people are closed.
I learned the lesson the hard way a long time ago. It was, lies are tough to keep track of.
So I was one of the first law enforcement officials in the country actually to use Periscope when that first came out back in 2014.
That was big during the riots too.
Yeah, and I remember when I did it. It was on a police-involved shooting in Crofton. And I was sitting there thinking, and this also goes to trust. My police chief at the time, I think it was Kevin Davis at the time. My police chief at the time, I said, I'm going to do this. And I thought to myself, hold on, I'm about to just simply talk to the people who follow me on this Twitter and tell them what I'm about to tell the press. What's the big deal? And I did it. And I, made sure I had a safe background and nobody was going to come behind me and heckle me, of course. And I did it, and it worked. And then ever since then, pretty much every press conference I did in Anne Arundel and Baltimore was live stream. And I felt like that's just the best way for transparency. And I'm a person that believes, now don't think my English is off. Transparency is a noun by dictionary, but transparency is actually a verb. It's something that you do. It's something that you actually physically have to do to be transparent. And I believe in it.
Well, it is, and we can look at that on the national level, too. You've eliminated, by going live, here we are, here it is from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And, you can spin whatever story you want to spin as a spokesperson for that, but, that's where it's coming from. So there's no middleman. There's no media to turn around and say, oh, well, we think he was doing this, or to put a spin on that. And, I think you look at the president is probably doing that, too. It's that this is, for better or worse.
Right.
And I mean that was just one of the really real things about you. I mean, there was not a, you said 1,100 homicides, which just really
outrageous.
Blows my mind.
Yeah.
And I mean, Anne Arundel County probably seems like Mayberry to a certain degree.
Yeah, I would probably come back and put my feet up on the desk and say, this ain't stress. But no.
Would you, given the opportunity right now, would you, if you were working here as a PIO spokesperson for Anne Arundel County, would you go up to Baltimore again?
Well, I mean,
knowing what you know now, and
I don't regret the decision at the time, and I don't regret my decision to leave at all. I'm happy with the chapter. You have to know when it's time. I didn't want to be the guy who people thought you need to go. I didn't want to be told it's time for you to go. I wanted to leave on my own. And some might think that it's premature, but I haven't awakened one single day since I made the decision and said, maybe I shouldn't have. Don't get me wrong. I miss some of the ability to talk to people, but it's time for the next chapter, whatever that might be. And I want to stay in service somehow because, I mean, look, God didn't grant me with the gift that he gave LeBron James or Kobe Bryant or any of these other guys. But he did grant me the ability to talk to people, relate to people, and lead them through crises, be a mentor, be in leadership roles. So I have to embrace the talent that God has blessed me with. And I'm a spiritual guy. And I believe, God has plans, and it was time for me to move on, and I don't regret it. And I've prayed on it. This was a decision a long time in the making. It was just that the time came back in October. So I'm very happy with that.
And that was that. What's in the future for you?
I don't know. I really don't know yet. I'm like completely wide open, and people have made plans for me, which I've paid close attention to. But there's an old saying: if you want to see God laugh, tell him your plans. So I don't know what my plans are yet. However, I'm looking at everything, and a return to Anne Arundel County is not out of the question. In some way, shape, or form, potentially. Some other opportunities in government, some things on my own, potentially. But to be in the Baltimore Police Spokesperson is a door that's closed, a chapter that's closed, and it was very valuable. And I think that I'm humbled by all the people who appreciated my tenure in that role. And when I first went there, I wrote a letter I wrote a lot of letters apparently, but I wrote a letter then that said, I'm not just a spokesperson, I'm a community advocate. And I don't ever want to be marginalized as just I'm not just I'm way more than that. And whatever opportunity that I'm given, I want to be part of the community wherever that is. And that's just something that's important and near and dear to me. And I'm thankful that I was taught those values.
Now, were you a cop in Baltimore?
No, I was a civilian.
So you were a civilian,
mm-hmm. But I got to carry my gun. So did you have a badge?
Yes, identifying you as, I guess civilians do as well.
Yeah, at the rank that I was, which was chief when I left, the civilians do get badges when you're of command rank.
Okay, so when you left, you were actually out of that whole share thing with Anne Arundel County, correct?
Yes.
When you left Baltimore City, you were not a cop?
I was not a cop in Baltimore City, no.
Okay. Were you considered a cop in Anne Arundel County?
I was still part of the Anne Arundel County books for the moment.
The books for the year or whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think one of the things that really made you, I don't say vulnerable, but relatable to everybody that saw you was that you weren't in the uniform. You weren't the guy with the badge and with the gun, with the arms outside and the black jacket.
And I think that mattered.
And it does. I mean, you were out there in your suit. You were out there in your T-shirt when needed.
Right.
Well, I think because we've seen a lot of PIOs, and the job is to take the information that the government has and that the police or fire department, whatever entity is, and to put that out for consumption by the media. But you brought a relatability to the information that there wasn't just 2 people were shot.
Right.
You understood the people who were shot and how it affected their families.
And I thought that was important. And again, I took risks. Don't get me wrong. This is not easy. I happened to be who I was, and I was allowed to be who I was. And that's credit to John Leopold, to Laura Newman, to Steve Shue, to Stephanie Rollins-Blake, to Catherine Pugh. They all allowed me. So a lot of these, scenarios where people think that the county executive or the mayor is reeling you in and telling you not to say anything, no. That's Larry Tolliver. That's Kevin Davis. That's Tim Altamari. That's Kevin Davis again. That's Daryl D'Souza. That's Gary Tuggle. Pam Davis. Everyone I work for allowed me to be me. And they even got to a point where they felt in certain scenarios that I was going to be able to articulate a message better than them. And that takes a lot of ego of their own to push aside and say, I think you'll be better handling this in this particular scenario.
Well, because there's an authenticity to that you don't get a lot when you're getting information from any PIO. Nothing against them, but they're doing their job. But, they can get there and say, all right, we've had, 2 children were shot, 2 children. And, of course, it's tragic, but then you move on to the next thing. And you were always one that made people understand what that meant to the community, what that meant to the people who lost those kids.
And people wanted to know. And really, you probably never, I'm not going to say you have never heard me say no comment. I've never once said no comment before the microphones. But I've given a no comment before. And it's a way you give a no comment. I can't disclose that information because of X, Y, and Z. And I wanted people to know, if I give you that level of information right now, the bad guy might have an advantage legally, and that could result in the bad guy getting off, which could result in us letting a murderer or a bad guy or whatever back on the street because we jeopardize that. So we don't want to jeopardize that. But when there is a better time to talk about that, I'm right here, and y'all can come back and we can talk about it. So,
and that's the frustration I think that people have. John being in the media and me just being a consumption of media, is that you want all the information right away. And it's almost a childlike sort of going, I want to know this. And you're saying, you can't, and here's why. And whereas other PIOs are just, they'll say, no, we have no comment.
And having a 6-year-old, the art of negotiation has become, perfect, where he's in the why phase of why everything. And you need to have some sort of answer, and some you can't even answer. But again, there's a way to explain enough that people understand why. And they're not going to have a beef with it. But when you're very short, one thing that I didn't do and people were forbidden, my staff was forbidden to do, don't ever cut me off. Don't cut the media off. I will stand up there as long as I have to and answer as many questions as I need to answer. But you're not going to accuse me of not being transparent or running away. No, I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to face the heat. And if it's a bad scenario, but I'm going to explain, but also a level of empathy. And I think, as much as we know that the majority of violence in Baltimore, majority of violence anywhere, the majority of it are people who put themselves in harm's way. They put themselves at greater risk of being homicide victims because of the lifestyle they chose. We know that. But that doesn't minimize the fact that there is a family that's left to bury this young person. There's a child that won't have somebody to call daddy, most likely. And I thought that my job was to make that more of a color coordinator, basically, and let people understand, here's what's going on behind the scenes of this guy who might be a bad guy. And that's just all I wanted to do. And I think that played a role into the response when my brother was killed. No one, I'm not going to say no one, of course some people looked at it differently, but people in general, the amount of condolences that I have, if I showed you the bag of cards, I got cards from all across the country, but I felt like every person in Baltimore mailed me a card when that occurred. They sent me an email. It was unbelievable and overwhelming. But I think people had a different respect for me because I didn't treat their loved ones like they were nobody, and then had an expectation that my loved one was going to be treated differently. So I think that they treated me differently. I tell you, in 2016, we were closing in on 300 murders, either 2015 or 2016. And I apologize, I don't know the exact year. I think it was 2016, but we were closing in on 300 murders. And a young man by the name of Kendall Fenwick was killed. He was murder victim number 295. And I remember being on that scene, and this became a big finished fence. He was building a fence in his community to try to keep people out of his yard. And I remember being on that scene, and a reporter asked me about number 300. I said, and you're just disregarding 296, 297, 298, and 299. I said, I'm not going to do that. I said, I hope we don't have to talk about 300, so I'm not thinking about 300. I'm thinking about preventing 296. And right now we're here talking about Kendall Fenwick, who happens to be 295. And you have to humanize this, because we get so caught up in these numbers and stats that we forget that it's a human attached to these numbers.
Well, I think people are also, it becomes such a political football that West Baltimore has become just a problem to be solved, and not because it's politically inconvenient.
Yeah.
And I think you look at Freddie Gray as a perfect example of that. Yep. Is that Facebook was on fire about that people were justifying it, going, well, he was no angel. I mean, he had a record. I'm like, yeah, but you're discounting someone, a human life, because you thought, well, this is something that he deserved to die because he wasn't an exemplary citizen. Or
that's ridiculous.
That was crazy to me, is that you're looking for reasons to justify something tragic that happened. And like you said, that's someone's son. Yeah. That's someone's brother.
It's no doubt that there are people and situations, and sadly most of the murders that occur in Baltimore, people that are involved in high-risk behavior, and then there's an output to that. But when you have interactions with the children of victims, with other family members of the victims, and if you need any proof, go back and look at the baby pictures of these people who are victims. No one was thinking back when they were a cute little 3 or 4-year-old that they were going to be a gangbanger, drug dealer, a killer, whatever. No one's going to condone the life that they chose to lead. But one thing I always say, there's somebody worse than the person who we're scooping up off the sidewalk who took that person's life. That's who we should be focused on. But the issues in Baltimore, and I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent here, the issues in Baltimore are so much bigger than law enforcement, so much bigger than policing. And the situation that took place in 2015 with the riots, if anyone believes that the riots were a result of the incident that occurred with Freddie Gray, then they are out of touch and don't really understand the problems in Baltimore. That was just the straw that broke the camel's back, and this was the cup running over, where it was, we're tired of this. And whatever the perception is of the incident that occurred is secondary to the fact that there was a perception among the people that we are being abused, we are being mistreated, and no one's listening. Sadly, much of that was violated, or validated, my apologies. Much of that was validated when the GTTF scandal came to light, and you see these accusations going back to 2008. And many people have been saying, we have been telling you. So a lot of what's going on in Baltimore is a system failure, a catastrophic system failure.
So it's interesting you should say that. I was listening to a podcast I listened to, Dan Carlin. He was a reporter in L.A. during the L.A. riots, and he was saying that to look at that as it's a result of the Rodney King beating, he said that is so short-sighted. He goes, this was before phones and before cameras on phones, and he said that you would have these black mothers coming in from Compton and Watts and all the inner city and South Central, and they'd have pictures of their sons saying, the police did this to my kid, they did it to my son. And he would say, as reporters, we would say, look, we don't know if that happened in a fight, we have no proof. And when the police were caught on film beating Rodney King, that was a validation for all these people who lived in these impoverished areas in Los Angeles and said, we've been telling you this for decades and you haven't been listening to it. And that was the spark that ignited the riots. So it's never because of an incident. It's because there's always a buildup that goes on for years or even decades.
And we're fools if we think that there haven't been some police who have done some awful things to people and abused their power and opportunity. But certainly we shouldn't cast a blanket. Unfortunately, like with most things in America, we're on one extreme or the other. It's all police, and that's not the case. But we have to, in law enforcement, as law enforcement leaders, hold people accountable. And we can't sit and deny the fact that we have had some officers do some horrible things to people. And it's very difficult for police leaders and city or county leaders to acknowledge some of these things because of some of the legal liabilities that come with it, with acknowledging it. I was just reading something in a newspaper that the Maryland president was advised by their legal counsel not to acknowledge that they failed Jordan McNair. Well, they did, and he acknowledged it, and he's probably going to pay with his job for going against legal advice to do what was right. That's dollars and cents would make the world go round, and if you come out prematurely and acknowledge something, it could cost your city or organization a lot of money. So you understand that, but the community has an expectation, and they just want, a transparent police department and call it out and call it what it is. This was wrong. This is why it was wrong, and this is what we're doing to get better. That's all they want.
I know the answer to one question, but do you think Baltimore is in better condition now than when you came in? Did you leave Baltimore in a better condition than when you came in?
He just winced.
And this is one I know the answer to.
It's levels and layers to that. There's progress being made in certain respects, and here's the real reality. There's no quick fix to the Baltimore problems. And this is a regional problem. There shouldn't be this war on suburbia from Baltimore, and there shouldn't be a war on Baltimore from suburbia, because Baltimore is the heartbeat of the state of Maryland, and we need a healthy heart for, the economic engine of the highways to travel throughout the arteries to our different counties. There's a long way to go, and when you have setbacks, it makes it feel like those things are going to be longer. It's going to take longer. Continuity matters. A lack of continuity is a problem, and there have to be some seismic shifts in Baltimore with certain things in order to really get underneath the problems instead of addressing the symptoms to the problems, so that the next generation can be set up for better success. And I know that sounds like a politically correct answer, but I'm just telling you, it's not going to change overnight. If next year, 2019, Baltimore ends with under 300 murders, that's not going to be this rousing success. We can look at that as a sign that we're moving in the right direction, but we shouldn't be popping bottles and celebrating because it didn't get over this magical number of 300.
Who do you think the success or failure of Baltimore police and the violence and the crime that we've got in Baltimore City, who's going to have the most impact on that? Is that going to be the mayor? Is that going to be the commissioner? Or is it going to be something else?
It's not going to be the police commissioner, and no one should think that some magical person in law enforcement is going to come fix things. They have never historically fixed things. The police department can't fix the mentality of somebody who wants to be a killer. That's not a police department function. The job and the responsibility of government is to set people up in a position so that they don't want to be the next killer, the next generation of killers. So really, I look at that whole situation as more of an educational issue, where we have to make sure we're educating our young people, and we look at a proficiency level where they get to a point of making a decision and they're better equipped to make a decision because they have the education to do it, where instead we have people that are making decisions and then thinking about the decision that they made after the fact. So I think education is the key. Like, I hear a lot of talk, and this is just my philosophy, it doesn't mean it's right, but I hear a lot of people talking about jobs and this. But if we magically were able to put 5,000 jobs in the center of Baltimore, create a transportation hub that got everybody to those jobs, but if we didn't teach people how to work, if they didn't know how to keep a job, how to maintain that
job.
This
ties into your into your ties program.
Exactly. So
20 years ago.
We can't just think that we can just throw these things in place and it's going to magically solve itself. We have to educate people so that they understand responsibility, understand accountability, and make better decisions. And really, it comes down, you can't teach common sense, but you can influence decision making. I was talking at a school recently, and I brought up algebra. I hated algebra. I hated it,
we all,
right?
I'm working on the kid on it now.
On that one.
And I bet many people listening hate algebra or hated it and say, I'd never used it since forever, right? But in reality, we probably, those of us who are decision makers or outside the box thinkers, we use it every day. One of the concepts of algebra was the unknown, discovering what that unknown value was. And if you're putting something together and you're missing a screw, there's an unknown. And you might come up with a remedy, a short-term remedy to fix that problem. And that's algebra. That's all it is. And you have people that don't understand the concept of how to think. So we have to teach people how to think so that they can understand this decision can cost me. This decision can affect my family. And I think as we transition those minds, then there are going to be less killers that are being bred. And therefore, there's going to be less of a need for law enforcement to fix these or try to fix social problems. That's not what the law enforcement's role is and responsibility is.
Did you ever get in trouble with the cops?
Ooh.
No?
No, I had I've been pulled over before, and, I've been here's an interesting story for you, and because I've been asked this a lot. I've been asked my opinion of police, my opinion of Baltimore police growing up. I didn't have much of an opinion. It didn't matter to me. I saw the police on my street. I lived on a relatively main road growing up, main street, and there was a convenience store down the street, and the police would always be there. And I would go down there. But my main reason for going down there at certain times was when the arcade machine guy was there. Yeah. He would put free change in there and start the game. You have like 8 credits.
The credits,
keep playing the wrestling game. So, but it wasn't like, hey, Mr. Officer, I didn't care. Really just didn't care. Out of my way, I'm out of yours. As I grew a little older, I remember going to the clubs like Hammerjacks, Paradox, down under the bridge where the stadium is, right? Where the stadium is now. And me and my buddy years ago were in a scenario, I was a teenager, where we see the police running up on cars. And we're looking in the rearview mirror. Next thing you know, boom, they're on us. And we're like, what the heck? Had our hands in the air. And they searched us, and they told us they were looking for guns. They didn't care about our drugs. And I'll never forget this. I actually can remember exactly what I was wearing, the jacket that I had on. I had one of the big flip phones on me, and it was like my emergency phone because it was like $1 a minute to make calls back then, right? So I had my phone, and I remember yelling, I got my phone on me. And they looked at it, and we didn't have any drugs, didn't have any guns, and they let us go. We didn't even think anything of it. And to be quite honest with you, we both have talked about it as adults. We almost looked at it like we're glad they were there because people used to shoot down there all the time, and we felt a little bit more comfortable that at least the police are here, so we shouldn't be a shooting. But it didn't sour me to police. I just didn't have an opinion. But that also probably speaks to that, quote, way of life that people are used to, when in all actuality the police didn't even have a reason to stop me and search us. So no opinion really.
Yeah. I'll tell you, TJ Smith, it's great to catch up with you again after a couple of years up in Baltimore. The retirement out of the Baltimore City Police Department, I think, you say you don't think so, but I think that you've certainly left the city in better shape than when you found it. You've got some big shoes to fill. I don't think they will be done very easily, if at all. And I look forward to keeping in touch with you and figuring out what the hell the next step is, whether it's law school, a run for mayor if you ever get that city address. I don't know.
Well, it won't be law school. I got 2 master's degrees, and after my last one, I said I'm never, ever going back to school ever again in life. Now, kids, if you're listening, go to school, continue education, but I'm done. The government is still asking me monthly for money for my student loans. But I'll say this about whoever takes my job on. And I've always told people this, and this is not an arrogant statement. Don't try to be TJ Smith. Be yourself. Because I was who I was, and the person that I was is based on a life of experiences. I used those opportunities and experiences to help convey the message to Baltimore. And I believed in using anecdotes to be able to tell people and convey a message that they're not in this alone. I'm not this detached person who doesn't have a clue or concept what they might be going through. But whoever it is, and I hope that, if anything, that my way of doing the job opened the door and opportunity for others to be real and convey messaging that way and not feel like it has to be so sanitized and so clean and so direct and so Joe Friday, just the facts, ma'am, that people can understand. And I think ultimately, even if you're struggling with trust, I think that people have a different level of respect for you because they become used to you and they know that you're telling the truth. And they'll even err on the side of caution with you because they trust you because you're always available to.
Can't argue with that at all. TJ Smith, thank you very much for coming all the way down back into your old stomping grounds in Anne Arundel County. We're here at Zinburger at Arundel Mills Mall.
And you're going to get my check for anything I buy while I'm at the mall, by the way.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Just shoplift. You got a gun.
That's fine. I thank you for all that you've done for the county, the city, and certainly for coming down here tonight on a Monday Night Football night to talk to us. And
fantastic.
We'll do it again.
Yes, thank you. Anytime. I appreciate you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And that was our time with TJ.
We got to do it with him again. That was fun.
That was a great burger, too. I like
we got to get him drunk and then really spill the beans.
I don't think he doesn't look like the kind of guy who gets drunk. At least not on Chablis.
Yeah.
He's kind of a big guy.
He probably had a gun.
Do you think he'd let me hold it? That'd be awesome.
No, it wouldn't.
No one ever lets me hold their gun.
But yeah, get a full insight into Baltimore. Go back and take a listen to the episode that we did with Commissioner Kevin Davis. And we've given up interviewing police chiefs because
we just get them fired.
We get them fired.
Yeah. I know that nothing we do is just sit there. We're a curse, I think.
Yeah. We probably ought to get to Tim Altamari with Anne Arundel County before Pittman lets him go.
He won't even take our call, I bet. How about that woman in Baltimore who got stabbed through her window? That's horrible.
And that was like a concerted effort between two people. Because they ran away together.
She was like this super engineer, church-going kind of... Do-gooder, yeah. And they went for a person, stabbed her.
But the, quote, homeless person was working with the guy that ultimately stabbed her.
Right.
Because they ran away together.
That's awful.
I mean, it's like, she gives her money and the guy says, oh, you're such a good person, tries to steal her purse. She says, hey, dude, what are you doing? And then he stabs her. She's dead. And they both run away together. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't intended to be a murder.
They get them?
No. I hope they do, man. I hope that guy rats in hell, and I hope that girl does too. That was horrible.
It's bad up there. Like when you go to Baltimore, like the window washers and stuff like that, it's nasty.
No, it really is.
And the people at the intersections, because we used to have that here before they passed the law. And I'm a big First Amendment guy, so I'm kind of torn by that. But, you go to Montgomery County or you go to Prince George's County or Baltimore, and every traffic light, there's people just coming up to your car.
Right. It's frightening.
I'm not frightened, but it's just, I make the eye contact because I'm not going to do that thing where I pretend I don't see them.
Right. But I mean, it's definitely when you're not expecting it and somebody's right there at your window, that gives you a start.
They're all young people. They're all like, at least the ones like in the counties, they're all like young white people in their 20s. I don't get it.
I know. Strange.
Millennials.
Yeah. Hey, coming up, we're going to be talking with the folks that are behind Ignite, which is sort of the mini TED Talk.
Well, Ignite is the program where it is 20 slides in 5 minutes and they're timed. So you start your slideshow and it goes automatically and you get 20 of them in 5 minutes on any topic you want. So you could be a team if you want. You can be one person. I've been at Maryland Hall the last couple of years, and the first year was in the basement.
This will be the fourth year.
Oh, this is the fourth year?
Mm-hmm.
And it was packed the last few times. And it was great. And the people who gave them, it was all courageous, the people who do them. I mean, because it takes a lot of balls to get up and do that. Some were spectacular. Others were
Bueller.
No, but they did their best, and you could see that they were eager to come back and do it again because, in all fairness, you're not going to knock it out of the park the first time out, but you can do it on anything. Someone did it on sailboats. Other people did it on
this silly stuff. It could be serious stuff. I mean, they talked about plastic straws last year. They talked about quantitative analysis. I don't know. I mean, there was a couple that I was just like, oh my gosh, is this 5 minutes up yet?
Yeah. I never thought about doing one. Someone said, you could do one. I'm like, there's nothing. I would do it on the Loch Ness Monster. I said I'd do that last year.
That would be a perfect topic.
I don't believe in it, but I was fascinated with it when I was a kid.
We are going to be talking with the folks behind Ignite. And actually, that's coming up in March, I believe.
Yep. And we got some crab cakes coming up, too.
We do.
You've been busy. I've been relatively busy. Not like you.
Well, I'm going to be talking to Rusted Root, who's going to be coming to play in town.
They've been around for a long time. They did Send Me On My Way.
I always thought that. I'm going to talk to him about that. That's one of those misheard lyrics that I've always misheard. I always thought it was Simeon the Whale.
No.
It's like that Phil Collins song, Paper Plates.
But the title of it, Send Me On My Way.
I never looked at the title. I just heard the music. And hopefully we're going to be talking with new county executive Stuart Pittman coming up pretty soon.
All right. And then I talked to Soren Baker. That's in the can, as we say, in the biz. Soren Baker was the writer of The History of Gangster Rap. And he's from Crofton, Gambrels, around there. So that's a local connection. He's out in LA right now, but he knows everybody in hip hop. He's friends with Ice Cube and all these guys. But
that's cool.
So yeah, we sat and we talked about that for about a half hour. And I'm talking to the guys from Veterans Compost. There are 3 veterans up in North County. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. They're up in Havre de Grace. And they are 3 guys who did several tours each in Afghanistan and or Iraq. And they've got a compost company. So it's like these big burly guys who do compost.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then you're also talking to
Paula Poundstone. Yeah, she's coming to the Ram set, so I'm going to be talking to her on Monday. So that'll come out next week too. She's been around for a long time. She's been around since like 84. I think that was her first special. She came out of that whole Boston scene. It was like her and Stephen Wright and Dennis Leary.
She from Boston?
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Interesting. So we've got a bunch of stuff coming up. If you've got ideas for us, we'd love to have them. How do they tell us about them?
Well, they could send us a letter, but we won't read it.
Okay. Do that before January 2nd, because I think postage is going up.
Is it? I
Yeah.
don't send letters. But they can send us at info@themarylandcrabs.com, or they can hit us on Facebook, where we have a group and we have a page at the Maryland Crabs, of course. And we have our Twitter at MD Crabs Podcast. So they can hit us there as well. And I think we'd have a text message line, right? At 443-266-3600. Again, that's 443-266-3600. You can send us a message or leave us a message.
Right. And to the asshole that calls that lets it ring twice at 2 a.m. in the morning, I want to find out who you are.
No, you're not.
Maybe I already do.
Maybe.
But give us some ideas. We'd love to have some ideas. Some of them come from, a lot of the good ideas really come from.
Oh, and we're going to be recording with our buddy Satchel from Montgomery County. He's coming out in a couple weeks.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he's a firefighter out in Montgomery County. He's a long-time listener, and he's wanted to be on, so he's coming out, and we're going to do it. And then Midnight Madness tonight, don't forget, because we'll both be down there, not together probably.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find me at the Market House Bar.
Yep. And get some eggnog at Galway Bay. Go try it. They always have people out front handing out their little samples of
stuff will light you up.
That's it. And, we'll say go Navy, beat Army. Army Navy's this weekend. Yep. The Parade of Lights is coming up this weekend. Ooh, I made a mistake. It's not called the Parade of Lights. They get really particular about that. It's like it must be referred to as the Lights Parade.
On the bay.
Not on the bay, just the Lights Parade. Eastport Yacht Club is really, really particular about that. I don't know
whether they're not the boss of us, so
I don't know whether they got sued or not.
I'm going to call it Chet. So come to Chet this weekend.
That's Saturday night. So anyhow, we're going to get out of here. We're going to get some dinner, and I hope you enjoyed this one with TJ Smith.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.